On my birthday, my sister took my son aside and said, "You don't have to end up like her, you know." I walked in just in time. He looked confused. Hurt. I drove us home in silence. That night, I found her diary in the basement. She'd left it years ago. I read every entry. The secrets inside would destroy her marriage, her career, her image. I'm not proud of what I did next. But I'm not sorry either. I'm Naomi. I'm 41. Divorced. Single mom. I teach freshman writing at a small community college in Ithaca, New York. My son, Ronan, just turned 13. My life isn't glamorous. It's not particularly exciting or tragic. It's mostly quiet. Predictable. Until last April, on my birthday, when my sister, Sabine, said something to my son that ripped the lid off years of quiet resentment and lies between us. I didn't know it yet, but that moment would spark a chain of events I can never take back. Things I did that I'm not proud of. But I don't regret them either. What she said broke something. Not just in me. My son. And that's what I couldn't forgive. So when I found the diary she'd left behind in a box in my basement, filled with things that could destroy her perfect little life, I didn't hesitate. I didn't plan it. I didn't scheme. I just acted. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. But mine came steaming hot, carried on the backs of years of bitterness, condescension, and quiet cruelty. And when it was done, I didn't look back. I hadn't had a big birthday since I turned 30. Back then, I still believed in things like fresh starts, make-a-wish candles, and symbolic milestones. But after my divorce at 37, the shine wore off. That year, I baked my own cake and invited a handful of people over, family mostly. My neighbor Lucinda and her partner showed up, and my coworker Max dropped by with a six-pack. Nothing fancy. Just a few hours of forced small talk and awkward laughter. Sabine had driven in from Philadelphia. Her husband Mitchell came too, along with their daughter, Ivy. We hadn't seen each other in nearly a year. That wasn't unusual. We'd never been especially close. Not since we were kids, anyway. Sabine is one of those people who walks into a room and immediately makes everyone else feel like their outfits are 2 seasons behind and their lives are 6 steps off track. She has this curated air of success, polished nails, expensive but casual clothes, just enough humility to avoid being called smug. She's a columnist for a well-known magazine. Writes about modern motherhood, marriage, professional ambition. She has this blog with thousands of followers who think she's the next Nora Ephron with better skincare. I never read it. To Sabine, I've always been the cautionary tale. The one who married too young. Got pregnant too fast. Gave up a career for a man who left me when Ronan was 9. A walking, breathing example of what not to become. She's never said it directly. But it's there. In her tone. Her glances. The way she introduces me, "This is my sister, Naomi, she teaches at a local college." Really smart, actually. She could have done anything. She's always loved adding that could've. So when I saw her kneeling beside Ronan near the garden out back that afternoon, I knew something was off. I'd just taken out the trash. The rest of the guests were inside, setting up for cake. Sabine had her hand on his shoulder, her expression serious. And then I heard it. "You don't have to end up like her, you know." I stopped. I think part of me hoped I'd misheard. That she meant something else. That she was talking about school, or screen time, or anything but me. But when I stepped into view, and she turned with that tight-lipped, frozen smile, I knew exactly what had been said. "Everything okay out here?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Ronan looked at me like a deer caught in headlights. He nodded, too quickly. Sabine straightened up and brushed imaginary dirt from her jeans. "Just giving your boy some life advice. 13 is a big age, you know?" I didn't answer. I just told Ronan to go wash up. We were about to make a cake. He left without saying a word. And I watched him go, wondering how much of what she said had landed, how deeply it had pierced. After the candles were blown out and the guests cleared out, I told everyone Ronan wasn't feeling well. Truthfully, neither was I. I loaded him into the car, and we left without much explanation. We didn't talk on the way home. He sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window. I could see the reflection of his face in the glass, still boyish, but shifting. Changing. Learning what things meant even if no one explained them. I wanted to pull over. To look him in the eyes and ask, what did she say exactly? But I didn't. We drove the rest of the way in silence. That night, after he was in bed, I sat on the living room couch drinking lukewarm tea and wondering how far back this quiet rivalry had really gone. Sabine and I were only 3 years apart. We shared bunk beds growing up, shared clothes, shared late-night whispered fears under blankets. But somewhere along the way, she became the golden one. The ambitious one. The one our parents bragged about at church. I wasn't jealous. I just got used to it. Being the other one. I went down to the basement around midnight. I told myself I needed to clear my head, maybe do some laundry. But really, I was pacing. Thinking. Feeling this tight, bitter coil wrap tighter around my ribs. That's when I saw the old cedar chest. It was pushed against the back wall, half buried under winter coats and boxes of Christmas ornaments. We'd brought it over from our childhood home after our mom died. Sabine never came to pick up her things. She said, just toss it. I didn't. I don't know why. I pulled it into the center of the room, wiped off the dust, and opened it. Inside were old notebooks, some photos, a few scarves that still smelled like her expensive perfume, and one red leather-bound diary with frayed edges. I hesitated. Just for a moment. And then I opened it. The first entry was dated March 1994. I kissed Mr. P today. He kissed me back. My stomach dropped. I knew who she meant. Mr. Prentice. Our high school English teacher. He'd been fired that year, something vague about inappropriate conduct that no one ever really confirmed. She'd been 16. She described their affair in excruciating, almost gleeful detail. How she'd initiated it. How she'd worn perfume to his classroom. Stayed after school. Left notes in his briefcase. She wrote about how she'd felt powerful and alive. Another entry, from 2003, 2 months before her wedding to Mitchell, was about sleeping with his older brother Julian. She called it a last fling. She wrote, if Mitchell ever knew, he'd fall apart. But he doesn't need to. Love is about what you protect, not what you share. I kept reading. There were pages about colleagues she'd sabotaged at work. Friends she pretended to support while leaking their personal dramas to others. A casual mention of making Ivy lie to her teacher about missing homework, just to teach her how the real world works. And sprinkled throughout, comments about me. She's soft. Weak. She always was. I used to feel sorry for her. Now I just think she's a waste of potential. Beige in a world that needs color. I read until my eyes ached and my throat felt raw. By the time the sun rose, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next 2 days blurred together. I kept the diary hidden, wedged behind the old furnace in the basement where Ronan never went. I didn't know what I was waiting for, maybe a sign, maybe just the space to think it through. But the entries replayed in my mind like a looped recording. The ease with which she confessed to so much, not as guilt, but as victories. Power plays. Her brand of morality wasn't just flexible, it was non-existent. And worst of all, she saw herself as clever for it. Smarter than the rest of us. And maybe she was. Until now. I didn't tell anyone. Not Ronan, not Lucinda, not even Max, who I sometimes drank wine with after work and trusted more than most. I needed to sit with it. The truth. The diary wasn't just some dirty secret, it was a mirror held up to our entire family. All the dynamics I'd tolerated for years, reduced to footnotes in her mind. But the moment that kept replaying wasn't the affair. Or the lies. Or even the betrayal of Mitchell. It was that one line in the garden. You don't have to end up like her. That was the real wound. Not what she did. But what she did to my son. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had a choice. I could pretend I never found the diary. Pretend my sister was just a product of childhood trauma or pressure or whatever excuse she'd come up with. Or I could do something about it. I didn't want revenge. Not really. But I wanted her to stop. I wanted her to see what it felt like to be cut open, laid bare. I wanted her to understand what she'd done. So I started with Mitchell. I created a new email address. A clean one. No connection to me. I scanned 4 diary entries. Not just about the affair with Julian, though that was damning enough. But also the entries where she talked about how easily she could manipulate Mitchell. How predictable he was. How she played the dutiful wife while resenting him for his emotional simplicity. I attached the files. No message. No signature. No name. I didn't expect a response. And I didn't get one. But 3 days later, Sabine called me. I almost didn't answer. But I was too curious not to. Naomi, she said, her voice clipped, her words trembling but contained. Did you do something? To what? Don't play dumb, she hissed. Mitchell left. He's gone. Took a bag and moved in with Julian. He won't talk to me. He won't even look at me. I said nothing. I don't know what he saw. But I know it came from somewhere. It had my handwriting. Silence. I trusted you, she said finally. That was when I left. A short, ugly sound. You trusted me? I said. After what you said to Ronan? There was a pause. Then the quiet click of her hanging up. In the weeks that followed, things moved fast. Mitchell filed for legal separation. Ivy stayed with Sabine, but the school called me about some behavioral issues. Apparently she had lashed out at a teacher. Said she hated her mother. She told a guidance counselor that her parents were fake. The counselor, not knowing the full story, reached out to me since I was listed as an emergency contact. I met Ivy after school, took her out for hot chocolate. She sat across from me in a booth at College Town Bagels, fiddling with the edge of her napkin. You don't think I'm like her, do you? She asked. No, I said gently. I think you're still figuring out who you are. Just like the rest of us. She looked relieved. But also skeptical. Like she didn't fully believe me yet. Sabine, of course, was unraveling. She posted a vague statement on her blog about navigating private family challenges. Then she stopped posting altogether. Her editor at the magazine released a quiet announcement 2 weeks later. Stepping away to focus on family. Lucinda told me someone from the local paper asked if I knew anything, but I denied it. Said I hadn't talked to Sabine in months. It wasn't a lie, technically. Not the kind that matters. I never told anyone about the diary. I still haven't. I keep it tucked in a box under a blanket in my closet. I haven't read it again since that first night. I don't think I need to. Sometimes I catch myself wondering what Sabine is doing now. Whether she suspects it was me. Whether she'd ever confront me directly. She hasn't so far. Part of me thinks she knows. But she's too proud to ask. Too terrified of confirming the truth. Because that would mean admitting I wasn't the soft one. The fragile one. The beige, forgettable mess she always saw me as. It would mean realizing I'd outplayed her. That summer, Ronan changed. He grew taller. His voice deepened. But it wasn't just the physical stuff. He got quieter. More observant. Less trusting. I caught him staring out the window a lot. I asked him once what he was thinking about, and he just said, people. He never asked about what Sabine said. Never brought it up. Until one evening in late August. We were sitting on the porch, sharing a bowl of strawberries. The sun was dipping behind the trees, casting everything in gold. And he said, out of nowhere, do you think people say things because they believe them? Or because they want you to believe something about yourself? I looked at him. Why do you ask? He shrugged. Just been wondering. I knew what he meant. She was wrong, I said. Whatever she meant by it. She was wrong. He didn't say anything. But I saw the way his shoulders loosened. The way he leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes. There's still no closure. Not really. Revenge doesn't fix things the way movies promise. It doesn't tie a bow around your pain or make people learn the exact lessons you want them to. But it creates space. Sometimes enough space for the truth to breathe. Sabine lost a lot. Her marriage. Her platform. Her image. But what she never had, and still doesn't, is what I've held on to since the beginning, Ronan. His trust. His belief in me. The quiet understanding that, no matter how messy I am, I've never lied to him about who I am. And that, to me, is everything. The start of fall came early that year. By the first week of September, the trees lining East Hill had already begun to turn, rust-colored veins bleeding through green leaves, the sky taking on that crisp, pale clarity that always made me feel like the year was shedding skin. My classes started back up at the college, and with Ronan back in school too, we settled into a rhythm. A quiet one. But the silence in our house was different now. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy. He didn't talk about his aunt again, and I didn't bring her up. But the air still held echoes of what had happened. There are some moments that wedge themselves so deeply into your memory, you can't unlive them. You just learn to arrange your life around them. Like a scar. You stop noticing it, but it never fades. One morning, about 3 weeks into the semester, I got an email from Sabine. Just a subject line, "You got what you wanted." No text. No name. Just that. I read it 3 times, then deleted it. She still didn't get it. I didn't want anything. Not in the way she thought. I hadn't plotted this like some soap opera villain. I just acted. And now she was a ghost rattling chains at the edges of my life. But she wasn't done. The following weekend, I got a text from Mitchell. "Hey. Can we talk?" Just us. It was early Saturday morning. Ronan was still asleep. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. "About?" "Her. The whole thing. I know you sent it. I'm not angry. I just want to talk." We met that afternoon at a park halfway between Ithaca and Syracuse. Neutral ground. We sat on a bench near the edge of the lake while a handful of people fed ducks and jogged in fleece pullovers. He looked older. More tired. Like someone had drained all the color from his face and then given up halfway. "I don't know what I expected," he said after we exchanged a few polite hellos. "I always knew she wasn't easy. But that, it was another person." I stayed quiet. "Ivy's doing okay, by the way. She's living with me now. Temporarily. The court said they'd revisit in December, but," he trailed off. "She won't go back." "I know it." I nodded. "Good. I'm not asking for more. I just needed you to hear it. I needed someone to say, you weren't crazy. It really was that bad." "You weren't crazy," I said. "It really was that bad." He let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for a decade. Then he turned toward me and said something I hadn't expected. "She hated you, you know." I blinked. That much was clear. But it wasn't just sibling rivalry. It was envy. Pure and simple. "She used to talk about you like you were some burden she had to drag through life. But when she got drunk, back in the early years, she used to say you were the only one who saw her. The real her." I sat with that. Let it settle. Let it sting. "That's why she hated you," he added. "Because you weren't fooled." It was the closest I'd ever get to closure, I think. And maybe the closest he'd ever get, too. We left it there. Didn't promise to keep in touch. Didn't hug. Just walked away, separately, the way people do when they've shared something intimate but too heavy to carry beyond that moment. Later that night, Ronan came into the kitchen while I was making dinner. He had a paper in his hand, an assignment from school. A personal narrative. He had to write about a moment that changed how he saw someone in his life. "I wrote about last spring," he said, sliding it across the table toward me. "You can read it if you want." I hesitated. He looked up at me, and for a second, I saw the little boy he used to be. Big eyes, full of hope and trust. But there was steel there now too. Like the world had shown him its edges, and he was starting to learn how to handle them. I picked up the paper and read. The piece was simple. A memory. My birthday. How he'd gone outside to help in the garden and Sabine had pulled him aside. How she'd said something about me that didn't feel right. How I'd come around the corner and look at him, not with anger or confusion, but calm. Steady. Solid. He wrote, "It was the first time I realized people can lie and still sound kind. That being smart doesn't mean being good. That someone who writes about honesty can still be full of secrets. And that sometimes, the person who isn't flashy, who doesn't shout, is the one who really sees everything. I put the paper down and wiped my eyes. He reached for his plate like it was nothing. Like he hadn't just cracked open his chest and handed me his heart. That's the thing about kids. They know. Even when you don't explain it. Even when you try to protect them. They know. Fall rolled into winter, and the silence between Sabine and I became a permanent fixture. She didn't try to reach out again, and I didn't go looking for her. Lucinda told me she'd moved, sold the place in Philly, rented a small apartment outside of Trenton. Someone had seen her at a co-working space downtown, looking worn, trying to pitch a new column no one was biting on. Word had spread quietly in journalism circles. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to bruise a reputation. Meanwhile, Ivy settled into Mitchell's new place. I saw her once or twice a month. She came over for dinner, sometimes stayed the weekend with Ronan. The two of them grew close in a way that reminded me of the childhood Sabine and I had before everything twisted. At night, I still thought about the diary. About burning it. Or mailing it back to her with a single note that said, "Now we're even." But I didn't. Because it wasn't about being even anymore. It was about something else. Winter came down hard that year. Snow blanketed everything in early December, thick and suffocating, as if the world was pressing pause. I spent my days teaching classes via Zoom, grading poorly formatted essays, and drinking too much coffee. Ronan had grown into a teenager seemingly overnight, taller, quieter, sharper in how he observed people. Ivy came over often. More than she used to. Mitchell started a new job in Albany and was out of town during the week, so on Mondays and Thursdays she stayed with us. She and Ronan would sit at the dining room table doing homework or watching movies on the couch. She didn't talk about her mom, and I never asked. But in quiet moments, I saw it on her face, the same quiet betrayal that had settled on Ronan's 9 months earlier. That look of "I thought I knew who you were." It was the same look I used to see in the mirror. One night in late December, Ivy came into the kitchen while I was baking a pie. She was wearing one of my old sweatshirts and holding a flash drive. "I found this," she said quietly. "At her old apartment. In a drawer she forgot to clean out. I don't know what's on it. But I don't think it's nothing." I took it from her, my heart suddenly louder in my chest. When she went to bed, I plugged it into my laptop. It was everything. Photos. Screenshots. Emails. A full backup of Sabine's hard drive, apparently. On it were drafts of her columns, the published ones and the original versions, which were very different. Emails to editors trashing colleagues, stealing quotes and anecdotes she claimed were hers. Spreadsheets of sponsored content she never disclosed, and messages where she coordinated fake reviews with influencer friends to boost her image. And then there was a private journal file, password protected. It didn't take long to guess the password. Her daughter's name. Of course. Inside were 43 entries, each more arrogant than the last. Sabine had written down everything she'd done, everything she regretted not because it was wrong, but because it might be discovered. I sat there for hours, reading, absorbing, shaking. And that was when the idea hit me. I didn't want her destroyed. Not really. I didn't want her groveling or ruined. I just wanted her naked in the one place she'd always worn armor, her image. Her identity wasn't her family. Or her success. It was the brand of Sabine. And I knew how to dismantle that in one precise stroke. I waited until February. I wanted to be sure the timing was right, not vengeful, just clean. She'd just launched a newsletter on Substack, Modern Woman, Classic Voice. I subscribed under a burner account. It was pretentious and overly polished, but her audience loved it. Every post got thousands of likes, dozens of comments. She was still trying to claw her way back into relevance, repackaging herself with a little more humility since the divorce. I crafted an email and sent it to 4 editors at media outlets I knew she freelanced with. I made sure it was clear, professional, and calm. Not scandalous. Not vindictive. Hello. I'm writing to alert you to a pattern of serious ethical violations from one of your contributors. Attached are selected files and screenshots, including undisclosed sponsored content deals, fabricated quotes and reworded copy lifted from other writers, internal documentation showing manipulation of reader feedback. All materials are sourced directly from the subject's personal archive, and full documentation can be provided upon request. I am not seeking anything. I do not wish to be named. I simply believe readers deserve honesty, especially from those who write about authenticity. I signed it, a reader who pays attention. I created a Dropbox link with carefully curated files. Nothing personal. Nothing about her marriage or our family. Just the professional lies. The deceit. Her public mask. And then I waited. 3 weeks later, the fallout began. Her newsletter went silent. One of the editors responded to my burner address and thanked me, said they were opening an internal inquiry and had suspended her submissions. Then one of the big-name writing podcasts she appeared on posted an episode titled "When Authenticity is a Performance." They didn't name her. But they didn't have to. Anyone who followed her closely knew. Within days, threads were lighting up in niche communities. Anyone notice Sabine, redacted, vanished? Journalist turned influencer, shady AF? Then someone unearthed her old blog. The quotes she'd stolen. A reviewer compared her recent newsletter to an obscure essay from 2016 and found nearly identical phrasing. And just like that, the illusion cracked. Not a breakdown. Not a scandal with police or headlines. But the slow, steady death of credibility. Her subscribers started to leave. Quietly. Without drama. Because no one likes realizing they've been sold a lie. The last time I saw her was at my father's 70th birthday. She showed up late, dressed down in a wool coat that didn't quite fit and no makeup, which for Sabine was unheard of. Her eyes looked tired, her mouth tight. She didn't say much. Just handed over a card and hovered near the punch bowl like a ghost no one knew how to greet. She caught my eye once across the room. I didn't look away. She didn't either. But something shifted. There was no rage in her anymore. No scorn. Just resignation. We never spoke. She left early. No dramatic scenes. No apology. But that was enough. Because I knew she knew. These days, the diary sits untouched in my closet, next to the flash drive. I haven't opened it in months. I don't need to. Ronan is thriving. Ivy is too. They're teenagers now. Complicated and real. Sometimes angry, often hilarious. They still come to me for advice, even when they pretend not to need it. And me? I sleep well. Not because I won, or because I got revenge. But because I told the truth in the only way I knew how. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just honestly. And that's something Sabine will never get back.